English summer's really good, isn't it? Lots of rain, moderate temperatures, and this has been a particularly good year for growing really juicy English coxes. Real English coxes, you can tell them by their taste.
Operation! You're the doctor having so much fun! Operation! You're the doctor, got the patient on the run!
Operation's the wacky doctor's game. Remove the pieces and collect your feet, but be careful or...
Operation! You're the doctor, it's so much fun to play!
Operation from MB.
Hello and welcome to Temporal Discussion, the episode-by-episode retrospective podcast on everybody's favourite kids' TV show, Nightmare. I'm Martin Harder, and my dad's harder than your dad.
I'm Martin O'Doney, and my mum's owed only a few quid in housekeeping money. I never got round to paying that. Yeah, clever, yeah, clever.
Very good.
I really had to think hard to get that one.
And I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome our guest today, the weekend lollygagger himself, Tom James.
Hello, and I've got no witty introduction to myself except just hello. So yeah, I'm Tom, or TJ, or many other names that I probably can't say on air.
Hello, Tom. Welcome aboard.
Hello to both of you. Thank you for having me on. I'm very much stuck in the 80s and 90s, as you can see behind me. Well, people on the podcast can't, but there you go. Nightmare for me. Beautiful show. Definitely on board with that. CITV didn't have as many shows for me as CBBC did. So it really was. I would come home from school and it would be, right, what day is it? Right, CITV day, because let's say there was a Nightmare, there was Children's Ward, but then next day would be Maid Marian, Biker Grove over on CBBC. So it's hard not to love Nightmare, because really it was one of the standout shows for kind of CITV across that era. It wasn't until kind of the mid-90s, which, well, from what I understand, kind of Nightmare kind of killed off in 94, that we started to get things like Reboot and...
Excellent show. Well ahead of its time.
Oh, God, yeah. Massively ahead of its time. I've got a feeling it was the first CGI-produced TV series.
I think it was, yeah.
Well, New Nightmare's well ahead of its time as well.
Oh, absolutely. Taking the chroma screen approach from Superman and various other films that had done it. I mean, that was an absolutely well ahead of its time thing to do for a kids' TV show, especially.
To make it interactive, certainly, yeah.
Or as interactive as it is.
Talking about Friday, it was kind of infuriating for me because BBC and ITV tended to have my favourite programmes of the week on it.
Ooh.
So I wanted to watch The Real Ghostbusters and then Nightmare, but at the same time, they had Maid Marian and Her Merry Men on the other channel.
Oh, yes, that was tough.
It's a real tough one to go for. You had to rely on the good old VHS player. But no, The Real Ghostbusters, completely forgot about that one as well. Yeah, definitely. That was another cracking show CITV had.
It's a kind of a long story, but it's only really the first two seasons that are worth watching. They seriously mega dumbed down the series after the second season. And
I've forgotten where it was now, or what I was doing, but I did some research into it, and yet they were trying to cater for the younger market, weren't they? Because basically they thought the first two seasons were a little too scary.
Yeah, they were worried about a cartoon about ghosts being scary. I don't know what qualifications the consultants had who decided to change anything on that.
Well, I have PhDs in parapsychology and psychology.
They weren't enough.
To be fair, the first two seasons are terrifying. The design of the characters in it are just absolutely mint. You can't beat them. They really kind of stuck with that original Ghostbusters feel.
Did you know that Ernie Hudson actually auditioned for the role of Winston but didn't get it?
It was Arsenio Hall got the part in the first two seasons, and then they actually got rid of him for the third season and brought Buster Jones in because they thought he sounded more black.
And then, of course, we also have that ridiculous side of things.
Oh, the Garfield complex.
The Garfield complex, exactly. Bill Murray now does Garfield, and the voice of Garfield does Bill Murray's... Anyway, I'll let you move on with this now, because otherwise I could spend all day talking.
Today we're looking at Season 1, Episode 6, which was first broadcast on October the 12th, 1987. We have a new number one with the Bee Gees single You Win Again, which is one of the most 80s music videos I have ever seen.
I just want to say, I love that song.
It is a good song.
It's one of those songs where I wasn't sure I'd actually knew it, but then when I went to listen to it for the podcast, I was like, oh yeah, of course.
Most people will disagree, but I actually think that was the Bee Gees' best ever song.
Right, Tom.
Yes.
We have an important question for you.
Dun, 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 dun.
Have you seen The Untouchables?
Yes.
We got one!
I've got no idea what it was about, and I really can't remember it at all. So you might want to kind of reverse.
We haven't got one.
It's one of those films, isn't it? It crops up on all the lists that you're meant to have seen it. And I vaguely remember watching it X number of years ago, but honestly, that was well before I actually paid attention to films. I'm much more into my film now. And yeah, I couldn't really tell you much about it.
Well, apparently everyone's seen it because it was at number 1 for 4 weeks.
We can't find anybody who can actually remember The Untouchables.
But let me at least clarify that in 87 I was 3 years old, so I'm guessing I didn't see it then.
The thing is, though, none of this really matters at the moment because we finally have a new movie at number 1.
Ooh!
We've got Eddie Murphy in Beverly Hills Cop 2.
I'm very sorry.
I have seen them all, but they've all kind of blended into one. I'm vaguely aware that one of them takes place in a theme park.
And I always then just think, isn't that the National Lampoon film? And then, of course, it's not, but
It might just as well be.
precisely.
The first Beverly Hills Cop film I'm okay with. I can sit down and watch that. It's not brilliant really, but it's okay. The other two, they're terrible. I just think there's something weird that Eddie Murphy is considered to be such a great comic talent. All he actually is just somebody who talks really fast.
That's possibly the only reason he got the job for Shrek.
The most positive thing I can say about Beverly Hills Cop 2 is it's not Beverly Hills Cop 3.
That is a huge stirring endorsement. It's the best endorsement I've ever heard Beverly Hills Cop 2 receive.
And without further ado, let's crack on with the show.
Welcome, Watchers of Illusion, to the Castle of Confusion. Phase across time with us once more, for this is the age of adventure.
As always, for series 1 to 3, we begin with Traegon's introduction, followed by a dungeon ditty. No virtual rhymes in it this time.
No, I was quite disappointed about that.
Well, I'm not, because the virtual rhymes are always rubbish. It's rather startling to realise it.
Yeah, but they're the fun kind of rubbish.
See, what I'm realising when you sent me this video to watch was I probably didn't start watching this until 91. So I saw kind of the last 3 years of its life. So that whole Dungeon Ditty bit at the beginning, I had no idea it even went on.
That's a shame. It was a staple of the first 3 series, wasn't it?
I tend to prefer the dungeon ditties as the intro to an episode to the way I did it later on. Be it, in season 4 and 5, you had Pickle basically reading out loud from a book. I thought something with a bit of music playing and someone talking in rhymes gives it a bit of atmosphere to get you settled into the program. I think it works better. Danny and team are in the later stages of level 2, and they've just been given a clue by Folly.
Says the right hand to the left hand, I don't know the way. Says the left hand to the right hand, I'm in disarray. Very well, quoth the right hand, then I'll have the say.
Folly then exits, and you notice he exits by walking through the wall. He actually misses the door completely and goes through the wall.
I did notice that he said, "Don't follow me,"
Don't follow me.
before he left. And then what did the team do?
I've got it just playing in the background here at the same time, so I've got to try and keep up with watching it again for the same time. You're right, I didn't pick up that he misses the door.
What usually happens when a dungeon character leaves a scene, they usually sort of walk under the camera, so to speak. But then when they go out through the sides, it always looks like they're passing through the wall.
There's a show called Garth Marenghi's Dark Place where they do that on purpose quite a lot.
Even without Folly's clue, they should have gone right by default anyway, because the adventurer's code, which they would have read beforehand, is very clear. Good is defined as the right-hand path. The left-hand path is usually going to be more dangerous. So even without Folly's clue, it should have been obvious. Go right.
I think half the problem here is the other advisors all get shouted down by Captain Yellow Sweater again.
So I'm guessing Captain Yellow Sweaters have been a bit of a failure this episode. Well, previous episode.
Previous episode, he was terrible. Look out for the podcast where we discussed his wonderfully constructive contribution in the level 2 clue room.
How is he going to eat a raw fish?
This room seems to be a nice, easy room. They basically tell you the answer, and there's nothing else in there to worry about.
You'd have thought so.
Turn to your right, Daniel. Forwards. Where am I now? You're in the bomb room, Daniel. Step forwards. And again, right. And again, turn right. Step forwards. Run. Quickly run.
This is an early example of what sometimes rather breaks the fourth wall in Nightmare, which is when the Dungeoneer is in what's called a losing status, when they've made a mistake in a previous room, which means they now have to die.
Yeah.
When they get into sort of one of these trap locations like this, the animation is sped up.
I was going to say, because I remember the bomb room from most of the series, I think, had the bomb room at least once, didn't it? And yeah, it's so much quicker than every time you normally go in that room.
Normally, it's worse than just slow. It is slow, but also the fuse keeps growing back. But this one, it's there, and it goes.
Danny's quest gets cut short, but on the plus side, it looks like it was a quick death. Treguard eschews the usual "oh dear, what a pity, never mind" in favour of another statement, one that we've not heard him use up until this time.
Ooh, nasty.
Ooh, nasty. It's the first ever use of it. Hugo says he coined it completely off the top of his head in response to this death. The only time he uses it in season 1 as well, but he did it a couple more times in season 2, and it was at that point that it really seemed to catch on and really seemed to chime with the audience. He didn't use it at all in season 3, but from then on, he just used it every season. By season 8, he was using it at the end of every single death, and he really started to ham up his delivery of the line. You're almost waiting for him to turn to the camera and wink at it.
If you check out Spoonie's video on Nightmare, an American retrospective of the show, and he refers to it as "ooh, crunchy."
If a war monster ever got to eat a Dungeoneer, that would have been crunchy.
Treguard then states what we're all thinking, which is that he can't understand why they went left when Folly clearly told them to go right.
For me, that's as memorable a part of Treguard's reaction as the fact that it's the first "ooh, nasty." It's the way he looks absolutely incredulous at the camera. I can't imagine why you did it.
The look in his eyes, his face, everything just sums up of what did you do? Why?
It seems like a perfectly natural reaction as well. It doesn't seem like it's scripted at all.
It was entirely spontaneous as far as we know. It's actually kind of weird for the first season Treguard. The first season Treguard used to really enjoy seeing a nasty death. It was one of his defining characteristics. But here, he's just so shocked that they managed to do something so stupid. His face just creases up. Oh my god! I can't imagine why you did it.
Treguard dismisses the team in the usual fashion and reminds them,
Remember to stay on the right.
I am loving the rainbow sky. That's a beautiful effect going on.
It is.
Before the cleaners even have a chance to pick up any Danny giblets out of the walls, Treguard swiftly calls in his next lot of goblin fodder.
Enter, stranger. Who dares the dungeon next?
Helen Abbott.
Well, stand not on ceremony then. Call your advisors to us now.
Anthony, Jon-Paul, Claire, Ken.
Dungeoneer Helen was clearly told not to wear blue because of the chroma key effect, and so chose to wear a jumper with every colour on it except blue. She's joined by Anthony, Jon-Paul, and Claire from mid Glamorgan in Wales. Another brief reminder of the rules, and Helen is instructed to step into the dungeon.
I am quite impressed that the rules reminders are getting a lot briefer
Yeah,
now.
I was going to say that myself. He's definitely speeding up the rules rundown. They weren't prepared to actually cut stuff out of it yet at this point. They were getting Hugo to deliver it more speedily, but they actually had to swallow their pride and start cutting bits of text out of it, because even now it was still taking a bit too long, and everybody knew it by this point what the rules were. There was no need for it.
I was going to say, I would absolutely love to see what or how the kids were kind of pre-set up before going on to it. What did they actually have to read? What did they get told? What rules were they told? How were they told to act?
Well, we do know that they were giving a sort of leaflet which explained the basic rules.
If you ever read the original, the first Nightmare game book, Nightmare novella, the game section at the end of it actually had the same text written in as part of the rules for it. So if you can find that, you've actually got a copy of the Adventurer's Code yourself.
Getting more difficult to find now. Although the rarest one seems to be the last one.
Does it?
Lord Fear's Domain. I can't find it anywhere on eBay, even with the bundles of the other books.
Where am I? You're in a room with...
And no delays here, please, team. May I suggest that Helen uses her feet?
The Four Doors Chamber yet again, and Treguard actually stops the advisors even bothering to describe the room, to hurry them out. And the worst thing about it is we actually agree with him.
They created these rooms. Surely someone must have thought, if we put a key on the floor, 4 doors, and they've just got to walk on the key, is that going to be good TV?
Well, the thing is, they started out with a word puzzle. They started out having to spell open. And then the next quest was Sesame.
Right.
Yeah, I'll say in fairness on the first one, it wasn't helped by the fact that the team were unbelievably slow.
Thank God they didn't take a leaf out of Indiana Jones and go for Jehovah and then make them spell it the correct way. So anyway, so they've been told off then and basically just told, just get on with it at this point.
It's a bit unfair actually telling them off. They weren't the ones who chose the layouts. But
Precisely. They've kind of just gone into this. They've just been given a very simple room.
More that Hugo is unfortunately giving them the short shrift for the failures of previous Dungeoneers.
The advisors guide Helen to walk over the key and it disappears, unlocking one of the doors.
Take a step to your left. Step forward again. Keep going. Right, stop. Stop.
Helen is then guided through to the next chamber.
Have you also noticed one of the advisors, Anthony, he keeps talking over Claire as she's trying to give the directions?
Yeah, it's like, but he says it like a second afterwards.
Something tells me Anthony wanted to be in charge and was told no.
It's not good for a team, though, when that happens.
Where am I?
There's something in the room.
There's a scorpion in the room with you.
There's 2 doors and a sort of fireplace.
Dire warning, team. This story has a sting in its tail, for this guardian was created by magic. Although it doesn't quite exist in human terms, it could still destroy you if it achieves contact. At the very least, it will seriously damage your life force.
We get our first appearance in the next room of the Scorpion Chamber. It's the same as the Worm Chamber with the snake in it from previous quests.
Just a different overlay on the left.
Yeah, basically, yeah. If you look at the back wall, you can see it's got the ruined door and what have you. And
I did like the effect on this, though, especially for the era. It looked really, really good.
Oh, yeah, it was quite spectacular. It's sometimes called the Spectral Scorpion because of the rather weird rainbow colours on it. Traeger warns the team that although it doesn't exist in the strictest sense, contact with the Scorpion may result in serious life force damage. But there is no excuse at this stage for there to be any contact with the Scorpion, and we all know why, don't we? Have you looked closely at when the Scorpion launches its stinger? It doesn't get anywhere near the outside wall. So the only way you have to go to avoid getting stung is just to walk straight to the wall and then just walk towards the door. The sting won't reach you.
I remember this being a much trickier obstacle when I was a kid.
It was trickier after season 3. It may be what you're remembering. They removed flagstones from the floor to narrow the safe range you could walk along. And so you had to walk through the line of the stinger. You had to time it properly. But at this point, all you had to do was just walk around and you were fine.
To be fair, though, I'm just rewatching it as we speak, and it's very, very close on Helen this time. I know they don't move to the wall, but collision detection on some games I play are probably worse than that. would have taken me out.
I believe you. Another little nitpick with Anthony. He says now rather than telling Helen to walk forward, which makes it a pretty useless instruction.
And this is why Anthony's not allowed to be in charge.
Where am I? You're in a room with a table with some clues on there.
Level 1 clue room, and this time the objects on the table are an apple, a gauntlet, an absolutely god-awful looking bunch of flowers, and a key.
Naturally, the apple goes straight into the knapsack.
Warning, team. Level 1 clues are invariably guarded by wall monsters. A manifestation is about to occur. Stand quite still, Helen.
Traeger's just completely given up on the pretense that they have to lay too long in this chamber now. He's just saying, yeah, there's this thing here. It's coming, deal with it.
When it got to the point where he was doing that little intervention after about 8 seconds, they realised that they were making everything look really ridiculous. And so, no. So Granitat appears out of sequence due to Olgarth being ill. I have no idea what the condition frost action is supposed to be. I may have misheard it.
According to the National Snow and Ice Data Centre, frost action is the process of alternate freezing and thawing of moisture in soil, rock and other materials, and the resulting effects on materials and on structures placed on or in the ground. They seem to have made some improvements to the mask, and he's talking a lot faster than usual.
Yeah, I think they're doing everything they can to speed it up now because they've realised that these are not, in themselves, these are not bad conceptual scenes, but there are a lot of them up to this point in the season have just been happening taking way too long, and happening way too slowly.
That's going to go for the natural evolution of the show, isn't it? This is the first season. This is only episode 6 of something that's pretty much brand new on screen for the UK, and it's learning all the time.
Another thing they've done to speed this up is that they've stopped. Treguard has finally stopped needlessly repeating the rules of the riddle contest immediately after the War Monster has already summarised them for everyone.
Yeah.
As you say, it's only the 6th episode, so they are learning quite quickly.
And as we all know by now, Granitas won't allow Helen to take any objects until she has answered. Altogether now, 3 riddles.
Percival and Galahad sought it, others seek it still. It has been called the cup that heals, give it common calling.
The correct answer is, of course, the Holy Grail.
Yeah, that was a fairly simple one. They got that one quite easily. But the next one had me stumped, if I'm honest. Here's the riddle anyway. What blindly sleeps for days, yet never lays to rest? What flies but never was a bird?
I want to mention at this point, I rather like the answer they came up with. I think it's quite clever. Time flies. Treguard was saying that at the end of every episode throughout the first season.
The first thing that came to my mind was time, mainly because I'd ignored the first half of it, because obviously time doesn't fit with what blindly sleeps for days yet never lays to rest.
I thought time as well.
I just can't understand how, to be honest, some of the kids got half of the riddles that they get given.
Well, I think kids are probably a bit clever back in those days. But then, of course, I'm biased because I was a kid back then too.
Fair enough.
I suppose the problem is that technically speaking, it's not really true again, because although bats are associated with only being around at night, and generally speaking, they are nocturnal, there's nothing terribly unusual about bats being around during the day. In that respect, the real answer is no better than the answer of time.
But of course, yeah, so the answer was a bat. Yeah, you're right. I don't quite agree with it. But to be fair, how many times have you heard an urban legend, an urban myth, and that's what's common knowledge versus what the genuine answer is. So I guess you go with what you think will be the most prominent answer. Okay, and the third and final riddle. Through dungeons deep and darkness cold, the miner goes in search of gold. Short of leg yet strong of arm, if you take what's his, he'll do you harm. I had no idea what he was talking about at this point.
This foreshadows a character introduced in season 2 called Bumptious, who is actually a dwarf miner.
Oh.
He was basically introduced as a parody of the miners' strikes. He even speaks in a voice very similar to Arthur Scargill's. As far as I could see, the myth of dwarf miners, historically, probably most people would reference Snow White. And the problem is in the Disney film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, they're actually digging for diamonds.
Yes.
So I'm not sure how fair the riddle is.
I assumed they were referencing Tolkien.
But yeah, no, I tell you what you meant about Snow White. And then, of course, what harm is Dopey going to do to you?
So 2 is the score, and Granitas informs them that although the bloom is off the rose, flowers may still please her.
That just sounds like they're making an excuse for the flowers looking so cheap.
Yeah, we couldn't afford roses. You're going to take these dried things that we spray painted silver and be happy about it.
Who would have thought that flowers made out of compressed oil might not look particularly lifelike?
And of course, let's not forget that anyone with trichophobia is going to be absolutely petrified of what's inside that vase there.
The team are unlucky here, I think. It's not sufficient information for a later corridor puzzle, which they end up having to guess their way through.
So the team take the flowers and the key. They were quite lucky to take the key, in my opinion.
But then again, what would you have taken the gauntlet for?
It can be used for all sorts of things. I think in one quest in the future, it was used because they had some kind of magical gem which turned them invisible.
We can go to the Adventurer's Code when considering that again. And one of the things the Adventurer's Code tells you is, beware the weapons of your enemies. Any weapon that you might be able to pick up that has no indication to the contrary, you should assume is a weapon of your enemies. And a gauntlet is a kind of weapon, so there's no indication from the War Monster that they should take it, so it probably is wise not to take it.
But of course, if they'd got that third clue, would they have... we know what happens later, but again, was there going to be something about taking the gauntlet for a later challenge?
Well, I doubt it, because it does appear they needed the key.
They take the flowers and the key and they move on to the next chamber.
And guess what that is?
Where am I?
Bum 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 room. 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 Be fast on your feet before your life was the bleach bum room. Bum 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 room.
It's another bomb room, this time with a locked door. Luckily, the fuse is refusing to light, and Helen had the good fortune to take the key from the previous room. She makes it through unscathed. I can imagine Danny's team cursing her as they watch the episode on release. Yeah, because let's face it, this bomb is so much slower.
It's what we call the magic bomb fuse.
I want to point something out here, which actually really, really draws attention to how blatant Danny's death scene was with the fuse sped up. When Danny arrives in the bomb chamber at the beginning of the episode, wouldn't it have looked more convincing if the fuse was just burning down normally, but the second door, the way out, was locked? Not only would that have looked more convincing, I actually think the sense of impending doom it would have given as the fuse burns downwards.
Well, that's it. Or have the door he walks in through have the sound of the door locking as he walks through. Something to give you that idea that, that you're absolutely stuffed.
Yeah, give them more time to process it. Instead of getting this rather shock effect of the fuse just suddenly zipping down to nothing in no time, feels a little bit unfair and certainly feels very forced.
To the left, Hal. Walk up. Stop. Take a side step to the right. And hold out the key. And walk forward.
In support of this law, they waste absolutely no time in the bomb room, rather refreshingly. They don't need tray guards to point out to them that they have to leave. They just go for it and they raise the key without taking any prompting.
It's funny that, isn't it? You don't need to be prompt when there's a giant bomb next to you. It's a given.
And yet some teams do.
Where am I? You're standing on the edge of a cliff with a hole with a giant in it. Turn to your left.
Helen, don't move, don't say a word. You're in the giant's chamber, and sleeping giants like sleeping dragons are best left undisturbed. Listen to the voices of your friends, and when they instruct you, creep forward as silently as you may. But don't move until they tell you, or you may suffer a fatal fall.
Well, fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of a stumblebum.
I like that phrase, a stumblebum.
I heard it as scumblebum.
I heard as scumble.
Hoping one of you might be able to tell me.
From the Cambridge Dictionary, stumblebum, noun, someone who often fails or makes mistakes because they have very little ability or skill.
It's lending from very kind of Tolkien wording, really, isn't it?
Well, the feet by fo fum very obviously comes from a fairy tale.
It's a great word, scumblebum.
As soon as this screen came on, all I kind of could think of was Bohemian Rhapsody and Queen.
I see a little Dungeoneer on the side. Stumblebum, is you rough or is you human?
You are far too quick at doing these things, Martin. Far too quick.
The scene here would basically, it's being set up for another silly sneeze joke, just like the first time the giant appeared. Do you notice how stupidly Treguard behaves when he's giving guidance to the team here? Is it if I move quietly, and then he raises his voice for the final instruction, which immediately wakes the giant up. Thanks, Treguard. He really was not on the team side, wasn't he?
I thought you were for us. No, I owe that giant money.
The terrible thing about it was, if you actually look once again, the team were getting on with it. They were already trying to guide Helen out of the cave.
Quietly and slowly, yes.
And then he interrupts to tell them really loudly to keep quiet.
There was a thing that Edmund Dane was commenting on a while back, that some of the Dungeoneers would be out of the room before he could actually say his piece. And so they had to try and think of ways to keep them there for a bit longer. So I'm wondering if that's what Treguard was doing here by telling them to stand still and be really quiet.
Really loudly telling them to stand.
Yeah.
Be quiet, everyone!
The thing I think I most loved about this scene, and again, I know it's people need to go and watch it, I guess, really, for it to make sense. But when the giant wakes up, he doesn't just immediately wake up. He's looking at the camera, and it's almost as if he's looking at the camera going, am I really doing this again?
What happened to my career?
What's your name, dwarf?
Helen.
Oh, so you's an human, is you? Why you sneaking up on I? Trouble with humans is humans makes I sneeze. And when I sneezes, I deads 'em. You know a cure for sneezing, human? You tell I. Now.
Hold your nose. Tell him hold your nose.
Hold your nose.
Oh, that's nice. That's good.
A serious suggestion as a way of giving the teen a second chance after the clue room. When they come up with the idea of the giant holding his nose so that he doesn't sneeze, couldn't they have got the giants to reward them with a bit of advice for what to do in the corridor of the catacomb?
Excluding the fact that he doesn't just immediately eat them and destroy them.
Again, it's just a glorified bomb room.
But then again, I guess I know it's not much of, but I guess they're trying to tell a form of a story by just saying, look, we aren't just puzzle rooms that people are going to get bored with. We've got some sort of interaction going on as well.
This is the second of his only 2 appearances, and in neither of them did he show any interest in trying to eat the Dungeoneer.
Which is really disappointing. He's a giant.
Yeah, he doesn't appear to be one of the giants from the BFG or anything, so he's not really interested in eating humans. He just has a problem that he's allergic to the smell of humans, and it makes him sneeze.
And thank God one of the children suggested just holding his nose rather than antihistamine.
Disappears from where it comes back with this giant pill. like from the Brass Eye episode about Kate.
One girl threw up her own pelvis bone before she snuffed the lid.
Love it.
Where am I?
You're on the edge of a chasm. It looks like...
Who's there? Helen. Helen! You're an intruder. I am not feeling well. And when I am unwell, I never receive visitors. Unless, however, you have come to comfort me in my convalescence, then I assume you to be bearing some suitable gift.
In the Serpent's Mouth Cavern, Lilith isn't feeling well. Being Lilith and being incredibly over-entitled, she'll come up with any excuse to demand a gift. Helen gives her the flowers. And somehow, despite the amazingly plastic nature of them, this does actually placate her. So Lilith allows Helen to pass while also granting her a well spell.
Now, I know we've said a lot about the Serpent's Mouth Cavern before, but it still amazes me every time I see it. David Rowe's artwork is just fantastic.
I watched this 4 times before coming onto this with you, just because I wanted to make sure. And each time I've watched, as soon as we've got to Lilith here, the costume, the makeup, the way she acts, for me, I'm a huge old school Doctor Who fan. I love the classic Who stuff. And that's what she just absolutely reeks of in this. She absolutely stinks of kind of a classic Who character that you come across.
One she reminds me of from Doctor Who is the Spider Queen from John Pertwee's last appearance, The Planet of the Spiders. There's something very over-entitled about the Spider Queen. And Mary Miller, the voice is very different, I should stress. It's quite high-pitched.
I think it's more just kind of the portrayal and the looks of it as well, just kind of feels very much of that kind of era of TV. It's nice, I like it. It's not taking itself too seriously, but at the same time, it's working.
It still establishes a real threat from Lilith. Even when she's ill, there's still a threat coming from her. Where does Lilith put all these presents? She's been given loads of them so far.
She just throws them in the canyon.
As soon as she gets bored with them, she just chucks them off the ledge. I want to take back something I've said several times previously. She doesn't actually do a double entendre every week because she doesn't appear to do one this week. I can't really find one in any of her words.
We were talking before, Tom, about how Lilith actually seems to be one of the more powerful characters in the dungeon, even to the point of telling Treguard off and banishing him from her presence.
This episode, she just seems very chilled out. I'm guessing in the previous 5 episodes, she's somewhat different.
She's very loud and very stern and very full of authority. And when she has words with Treguard, it's sort of like a sort of stereotype dominant wife and an easily dominated husband. There are many occasions when Treguard looks absolutely petrified of Lilith over the first 2 seasons.
We did wonder for a while whether they had actually had a romantic relationship at some point.
That would have been novel.
Rather an interesting one, though, isn't it? She was the original wife of Adam, and then she chooses an Anglo-Saxon dungeon master.
She likes a bit of rough.
Likes a lot of variety, let's put it that way.
Likes beard.
Oh, now I understand why you grew it. He got a crush on Mary Miller. And you as well, Tom.
Of course. The glorious makeup she's got on there with the terrifying eyebrows and what looks like a goatee.
Enough makeup to deflect a cruise missile.
Yeah, there's a somewhat makeup in the realm of Sunblock 3000 or whatever it is from the RoboCop film.
Mary Miller, we know you can't hear this, but we love you.
We do. She was absolutely brilliant as Lilith. Better in season 2 as Mildred. Fantastic as Mildred.
Right, take a step forward. Well, turn to the right.
Carry on forward.
Now forward.
Where am I? You're in a room, sort of a corridor with 4 doors.
Warning! Warning! Critical threat in the great corner of the catacombs. This is not a drill. This is a drill. Warning!
Warning, hang on, who replaced my script with one from Red Dwarf?
Why did they not have it doing this every time? They could have done this along with having the shadow demon at the far end of the corridor, and it would mean it isn't just a threat after all. It's a double threat. It's a triple threat. You wouldn't have been depending on a sound effect of marching footsteps for the threat in the great corridor.
Tom, usually the Great Corridor of the Catacombs is basically just a corridor.
Yeah.
And nothing ever happens there. All you get is a sound effect that Traegar claims is the army of the dead.
Right, so this is the first time we see a skull appearing from underneath the floor then.
It's the first time anything happens.
Which is a very, very cool effect, especially knowing how this was filmed.
Up until this point, Traegar has constantly berated Dungeoneers for going into the corridor of the catacomb. And of course, they never have any choice but to go in there. It's quite clear they're supposed to go in there.
And now something's actually happening.
The fact they've come up with this idea of making flagstones disappear.
The skull just looks so cool though, doesn't it?
It does look really, really nice. Just everything about it, kind of the colour, the shade, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It is a thing of beauty.
I'm genuinely excited about this. Something is actually happening.
It's happening, Reg! Something's actually happening, Reg! Can't you understand?
Do you know what? I wonder how many kids missed that skull motif the first time because they're more paying attention to the sodding life force meter that they've plonked straight above it, which, to be honest, doesn't look as good.
It's a pity they didn't use this one all the time, really, because it's so much more effective.
Would it have lessened the effect if they did that?
Well, you can ask that question about any number of rooms that get used quite frequently. It's better having that effect and maybe sort of desensitizing the audience to it after a while than just having to listen to Traegar trying to convince you that you're in big danger.
Possibly, but maybe that was the idea all along, was to make you think it was going to be boring each time, and then suddenly this thing happens. You're like, Marjorie, come here, come see this, come into the room.
That wouldn't have been the idea, not at all. It was just purely they couldn't come up with anything that they could animate until they thought of removing flagstones.
And of course, this team avoid the Adventurer's Code, which again, we said earlier, didn't we? We thought it's a bit unfair that they got 2 out of the 3, so they only got 1 clue to help them on. But I guess if you've got to put with that 50-50 choice, they should have gone right.
I would agree with that. I do think they were a bit unlucky, but at the same time, if you haven't got any other indication, go right.
Where am I? Helen, you appear to be in a rather large room with 4 doors. 2 in front of you and 2 to each side. They all have got portcullises.
They choose left, though, and they arrive in the variant 4-door chamber.
With portcullises covering all the doors.
Spell casting. W-E-L-L.
Unfortunately, team, the well spell can only reveal a well. It can't create one. Oh dear. Rotten luck. A 50-50 chance. But without the full reward from correct riddles, you turned left when right was right.
Bit of a rotten ending for them, granted, just being locked away. Maybe there could have been some other impossible room they could have come up with rather than just saying, yeah, well, guess what, it's game over because you can't go anywhere.
They didn't really have too many of those options available at the time.
Ah, fair enough.
What they would have done in season 3, from season 3 onwards, was they'd have had a monster. For instance, a pair of goblins would have been in the room. All the exits would still have been locked, but the goblins would then close in on her, and then the life force would fill the screen to hide the bit as the goblin eats her or something.
I would have asked them to accept that they'd failed and then go back and film the scene previous to that and kill them off in the corridor of the catacombs.
Precisely. You could have gone back, and instead of killing them in the room with portcullis, they could have chosen the left, and as they get to that door, take away the flagstone.
Yeah.
That would have been more of a satisfactory death.
Another thing they hadn't really mastered at this point, in fact, I don't think they'd really mastered it in season 2 either, was actually portraying falling. What happens a lot of the time in the first 2 seasons, especially when Lilith decides to kill off one of her visitors, they'd make the ledge disappear beneath their feet, but then the whole screen would sort of drop out of the way to reveal the life force clock behind it. They managed to get a one fall with the Dungeoneer just disappearing down the chasm rather than the whole screen just dropping quite late on in season 2. But the technology they had to portray it wasn't that good at this point. Midway through season 2, I think it was teens 5 or 6, a kid called Tony, I think it was. He's portrayed as locked into that same 4-door chamber, but Mogdred appears and he says, "Welcome to one of Mogdred's little playpens, Dungeoneer. Play a while, play forever." And then it's diabolical laughter and this really haunting, sinister chord of music played at the same time. You've got a presence there rather than just the clock running out. There's something in there that makes it actually dangerous to be in there in itself.
Helen, of course, survives outside the dungeon, so now it's time for you to join her. Spellcasting DISMISS. Farewell, Helen, Claire, Jon-Paul, and Anthony. Take those scrolls, for you've earned them. You kept your wits, but it was luck that deserted you. Farewell.
And thus ends the 3rd shortest quest so far.
I think they were dealt a bit of a bad hand, but then again, they should have listened to the Adventurer's Code and gone right anyway.
I do think other teams have been in similar situations and they've got away with it.
And yet, level 1, you wouldn't expect absolutely perfect score, would you? You'd expect them to learn as they go on. Level 2, it's a little bit harder. Level 3, yeah, I'm sorry, if you don't get it perfect now, then of course you're not going to go anywhere.
So much, alas, for the Welsh wizards. Let's find out who challenges next. Enter, stranger. Who dares my dungeon?
So here come our 3rd team for the episode. Dungeoneer Richard and his advisors Jonathan, Paul and Edward from West Yorkshire. Jonathan especially seems very keen to be on television.
Jonathan Morley from Normanton in West Yorkshire.
Traegard gives another brief reminder of the rules and sends Richard on his way. I love Jonathan in this scene. I think he's fantastic.
They're very loud, all of them, aren't they? Jonathan and Paul both have very loud voices.
It's nice to see that they've all worn their school uniform and their school team colours.
Oh, I hadn't noticed that.
The lad at the beginning, the red top, and they're all wearing school trousers from the look of it, and it just looks like school colours.
Yes, you're quite right. This is the best team in season 1, which I must stress that they are the best team in season 1.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But they're far from flawless. It's actually notable both of the best 2 teams in 1987 were from Yorkshire. So this team, they do have a tendency to get a little bit agitated at times and start talking over each other. But their general decision-making and a lot of their manoeuvring is quite impressive.
To be fair, they seem a very young team as well.
I'd say they're a bit younger than the previous couple, the previous one. They're clearly older than Danny's team, though.
Right, okay.
Quick mention for Traegard here. He's managed to get I actually timed this the other day. Traegard got the rules reminder down to 58 seconds.
Well, considering it's the 2nd or 3rd time we've heard it this episode.
Yeah, they really needed to just cut out most of it and just get it down to about 30 seconds.
Well, again, that always kind of bemused me. Why I know they're showing them, telling them the rules, but was it really needed? You could have had about 3 minutes of extra footage.
Well, this is a conversation we've had throughout the podcast so far. Well, there's another thing about this. I won't go into too much detail here, but there are clear indications later on that parts of this quest have actually just been cut out to get the season down to within its broadcast time. Very clear indicators that a number of rooms have been cut out. Had they cut out the long speeches that Traegard gives at the beginning, they might have been able to get the whole final quest into the broadcast time.
Problem is, it's the nature of kids' TV. You've got to assume that A, they are just watching this for the first time, or B, they have actually forgotten.
But you don't, do you? Because they don't do that after season 2. They do really skip over the rules rundown from season 3. onwards.
But by season 2, they've got an idea of the audience that are watching.
Yeah, so I can understand it in the first season. You're going to have people, they're channel hopping, they're still discovering the show. You're quite right, Mark. I see where you're coming from there. And then, but you're right. From season 3, you've already know that you've got a fan base, you've got a large viewing number. Hence the reason you're on to season 3 right now. So you would hope that the majority of people are watching know what you're doing now. And then the ones that don't will pick it up as they go.
But then you could still take exactly the same attitude by about halfway through season 1. So
that's true.
Any newcomers at that point could just pick it up as they go along.
Yes, that's again true.
I do suppose that they had to err on the side of caution because they didn't know at that point what was going to work and what wasn't. Richard is dispatched for the first chamber. And this is actually the first genuine surprise in Nightmare because it's not the typical 4-door chamber.
Where am I? You're in a room and there's 2 exits, one on the left and one on the right. On the floor there's like a small bridge shape.
Ah, an unusual obstacle to encounter so early in the quest. However, not exactly difficult to surmount. First use your eyes, then use your wits, then use your feet.
You don't think that this episode's Corridor of the Catacombs was a surprise?
It was refreshing. What the big surprise is we've actually got a different chamber altogether to start the quest.
But it's not actually a new chamber, though, is it?
It's not. It is just the variant 4-door chamber again. It's the one that had the catacomb bite in it. And in fact, it's actually the previous chamber, if you think about it, because it's the same one that Helen just died in.
She's obviously been busy.
Yeah, I'm going to do the place up, she's obviously put.
I was going for the fact that she's raised hell demons from the ground before dying.
That clearly knocked a gigantic hole in the ground to let them out.
Well, no, that's what happened when she cast the well spell.
Oh, it actually created a river.
It did work. It's just after they'd been binned off.
Yeah, it's extremely brightly lit now, isn't it? And it's got this lovely, colourful rainbow effect on it. So it's actually probably the most visually striking chamber in the entire first season.
Well, that lava probably creates some good light for it.
Yes, that will be it. Yeah, we have to rationalise everything, don't you know? It's actually a really, really good bit of variation here that I think the producers have now realised they need to make full use of the idea that rooms within Nightmare Castle aren't connected in the normal physical way. That means you can really jumble the order up in any way you want to. So do it. Don't have everything following the same formula every time. And so, although it is another 4-door chamber to start with, at least it's a different one, and it's actually a very different type of puzzle. It's still an easy puzzle, should be stressed, but it's a different type of puzzle to get you started with.
I would go as far to say as it's actually the same puzzle. It's just that it has a different effect.
Yeah, rather than walking over the key and the door opening, this time it's walking over the symbol and the bridge appearing.
Well, the execution of solving the puzzle is the same, I grant you. It should be pointed out you now got access to all 4 doors as a result of this one.
Although, would you say 2 of those doors are accessible?
Good question.
I mean, the team that chooses to go right straight away burns to death, making them the real short team.
Now could you walk forward? Stop. Say stop.
The music played when the puzzle is activated here is very over the top.
I know, it's so ostentatious, isn't it? Congratulations, you stepped on a tile, Pete.
Woo!
It's sort of like in a medieval court. All it is somebody walking over a bridge, mate.
I was sat there thinking, is that timed? By the time they get onto there, if they're not quick, does the bridge just disappear? That would have been a really, really mean way to kill them off.
It is a magic bridge, isn't it? And magic does tend to have time limits in Nightmare, so maybe it would disappear.
Again, it's just kind of one of those reasons to spur them on. I mean, I know they didn't spend much time in that room. They were quite on it straight away onto the bridge icon and off they went.
According to Traegard, they almost walked him off the bridge.
Well, yeah, they did. They did a lot of positioning work on the bridge, which really they didn't need to know. They could have just said walk forward and then move them towards the door once they're across.
I'm fully in favour of this, even if the change is only pretty minor. It feels fresh.
And then, of course, it all goes downhill again.
Just keep going. Faster. Keep going. Faster. You're all right now. Where am I? You're in a room. There's a bomb on your right, a key in front of you, another bomb in a doorway, and a goblet.
2 goblets.
So what comes up next? The Four Doors Chamber, but it does look like some toddler's just come along and thrown all his toys out onto the floor, doesn't it?
Do you remember those sort of animation studios of the kind of the early 90s, mid 90s that you used to get for like Windows 95, where you could just drag and drop things on and then just make them move around? And that was as far as animation got. This is feeling like someone's got hold of Coral's kind of clip art and just gone, yeah, stick that there, done.
It does look messy, this chamber, but there is meaning in the madness. There's actually been a bit of imagination used this time. Each symbol on the floor unlocks a specific door with the corresponding symbol on it.
I got that. It's just the way it looks.
Yeah, it's messy. It looks messy. But, you know, the variants of it are used in Season 2 as well. It becomes a place where you can actually choose which quest you want to follow. Fire exit will obviously lead to somewhere very, very hot, maybe some kind of fire cavern. The Grail symbol is the one that signifies an actual quest, very obviously.
Before Richard had a chance to even move.
Warning team, a complete temporal disruption approaching. Time is now the enemy. Oh dear, a temporal disruption complete.
Drago's usual sign-off for the episode, which means that we should probably sign off for ours as well.
That sounds a very good idea. I don't know how long we've been doing this. I didn't even run a timer for once.
Coming up to 2 hours.
Well, you can thank me later for that one. But I was just literally just passing as we were coming to the finish. I absolutely didn't realise Tim Child created one of my all-time other favourite shows, Cyberzone.
Be quiet, Cyberfilm! Welcome to the Cyberzone. Behind this fence is a virtual world controlled by one colossal computer bank. Great Britain just got lucky. Let's hit it!
I loved that, and it just never came back.
Yeah. I think there was a reason for that, let's be honest.
No, it was good.
I don't think quality was the problem with Cyberzone. I think it was a bit too expensive.
Yeah, but then again, it just kind of shows. So Tim Child came up with Nightmare, which, let's face it, very forward thinking, very ahead of its time. Cyberzone, again, very ahead of its time. Full use of kind of all the virtual reality side of things now instead. And yeah, that was still kind of unheard of in 93.
Yeah, there was also Virtually Impossible, which was like the kids' version of Cyberzone.
Yes.
And a game show on CBBC called Time Busters, which was fantastic.
Very clever show, that. Links with Nightmare weren't just Tim Child, because a certain Mark Knight appeared on Time Busters, and Mark Knight played Lord Fear on Nightmare.
Oh.
We better do our sign-off, anyway. Tom, have you got anything you want to plug?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love you to come and find me on Twitter, which is @WELollygagger. I randomly talk about random things regularly, so feel free to come and join me on that. You can also find my YouTube channel on youtube.com/weekendlollygagger, which is a variety of old games that are generally pretty terrible, but sometimes there's a few other things in there, but ultimately that's it, really. I'll hold off on that. Thank you very much, and thank you, gents, for having me.
Join me as I talk about stuff I really hate.
It's not really hate. The Grange Hill game is a terrible game.
To be fair, the Grange Hill game has one of the best anti-drug messages ever.
Absolutely it does. And again, go and watch the video on it and you'll see it.
So if you've enjoyed the podcast, you can follow us on Twitter @NightmarePod. If you want to contact us, you can do so by emailing broomcupboardclub@gmail.com.
But also make damn sure you say nice things about us, because otherwise we won't want to talk to you.
And it would really help as well if you could leave us a review on the apples. leave us a review on the apples and then put it in your knapsack. I'm keeping that in. So we'll catch you next week, and in the meantime, don't have nightmares.
I've literally forgotten what's supposed to, and I don't know why I've forgotten what's supposed to. Just watch them instead.
Did you genuinely forget it?
Really smoothly done. They go so well. It's just. It's just absolutely a professional operation from start to finish. Every episode, don't you just admire it?
Oh, We've got to love this as well. I literally just flicked onto Twitter while we're going, and the first thing that pops up: what is Kevin Costner's best movie? I think it's.
Oh God, really?
The Untouchables.
Stumblebums.
And if you like, you can now support us on Patreon. Just search for Temporal Discussion. We've already spent some of the Patreon money on a microphone arm, so I don't do my back in every time we record a podcast.